And I remember thinking like, no way, like, yeah, maybe for you, maybe for you had that experience, but it's going to be like special and magical, and we're going to share everything equally. And it
Mm,
was not like that at all. He was
yeah.
absolutely right.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue podcast, the show where we talk about these successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lawrence. Quick reminder as always, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to get in touch with the show, register your interest in being a guest on a future episode. I'd really love to hear from you. Today's guest is Matt Marquez. Matt is a relationship coach and a father of a 4-year-old girl. In the episode, we talk about all sorts of topics, including Matt's heart behind becoming a relationship coach, why he did it, and his approach to maintaining different relationships. We also talk about how Matt had planned to be a stay-at-home father for quite a long time, but actually ended up wanting to make a change. And then this is a part of a bigger discussion about the wants and the desires that we have as parents, the importance of identifying them and knowing how best to serve and lead our families. It was a super interesting part of our discussion. And something that Matt says a bit later on in the episode actually does challenge me a little bit. And you can see that there's something that I'm trying to kind of ponder on and think about. And honestly, after the episode, it took me a long time to kind of process a few things, and I'll give you a little bit of a wrap up in the outro conclusion as well. So do look out for that super interesting part of our discussion. Thank you so much for Matt coming on the show. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get into the conversation. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us today for the Dad Dialogue podcast. Why don't you just start off by telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself and your family?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, Lawrence. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I am a relationship coach. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. I have one daughter who's 4 years old. She's like feisty and really excited, and like she definitely is having me look at life differently. I used to always hear about that, like you kind of see things differently, like through the eyes of your child. Definitely seeing that, experiencing that now. And so my partner and I, we are here in South Texas, and really kind of at a bit of a crossroads, I would say right now, also just in terms of our life and what do we want for our daughter? What do we want for ourselves? So it's an exciting time, scary time. Probably, I feel like a lot of dads go through at some point, maybe all the time in their lives.
Yeah, I think when you talk about a child before they start school, kind of in that kind of like baby up until 4-year-old, it feels like we're always in a crossroad. It's just because there are so many decisions that could be made. And then a lot of people will tell you that like once they're in the school and they start making friends, like, oh, no decisions can be made, which I don't think is true. I think if a decision can benefit a family, then that's a good decision to make. But no, I get what you mean. I have 2 young kids, 3 and 1, and it does kind of feel like we're constantly like every 3 or 6 months, it's just like, are we at this place again where we have to like think about all the permutations and all the pros and cons about this new thing yet again? Um, so no, I think that's a common thing at this age, at least.
Yeah, I mean, they're growing so fast, they're changing so much. It really almost feels like I have a new child every 3 or 6 months or something.
Yeah, you feel like you've mastered one aspect of parenting. You feel like, right, I've got this under control. I know how to respond to them in this way. And then this whole new personality comes out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, I remember when my daughter first started really talking a little after she turned one, and I was like, "Oh man, thank goodness she can talk. She can tell us." I'm like, "It's all downhill from here." I mean, it's like just easier from here,
Mm.
but it's definitely some different challenges keep coming up. Yeah,
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm sure the people that are more advanced than us in the parenting game would be laughing at us talking about the experiences that we've had, and that's kind of the heart behind this podcast. I hope to think that some people do kind of giggle at themselves hearing about relatively new dads, people that are still in that kind of 4-year, that kind of world of like, oh yeah, well, you've got your challenges ahead of you for sure, guys. So, we try and get prepared together, right?
absolutely.
So when we were chatting a little bit before via email, you mentioned to me that one of the struggles or one of the stresses of kind of when your daughter was born was an affection she showed towards her mother and maybe a preference that she showed towards her mother. When did that start happening? And was there at any point that you actively tried to do something to course correct that?
Yeah, I would say my daughter's preference for her mother was like instantaneous, like the moment she was born. It really felt
Yeah.
like that. And I grew up, or I was living in New York. I met my partner in New York, and so we were there for a long time. And so we didn't really have a lot of friends who had kids. That
Right.
just for some reason that when you live in a big city, like all of that gets delayed. And so we had one really good set of friends who did have a child, and we would talk to them as when we were pregnant. And I remember my friend telling me, he's like, "Hey, you might have this vision in your mind of like you're sharing every experience with your wife and the mother. It is not going to be like that. It is almost
Yeah.
guaranteed not going to be like that. You're going to be a support role, and like you're going to be creative on how you
Mm.
be supportive in your family and with your child." And I remember thinking like, no way. Like, no way. Like, yeah, maybe for you, maybe for you had that experience, but it's gonna be like special and magical, and we're gonna share everything equally. And it
Mm.
was not like that at all. He was
Yeah.
absolutely right. And so it was, yeah, it was kind of a rude awakening, I think, in the
Yeah.
beginning, because it really felt like there was this special magical bond being created, and I was just watching it happen.
Yeah.
And as our daughter got older, it still kind of kept growing and developing. I could see that relationship, and especially when she was like a really small child, my daughter, she wasn't really into being held and
Right.
by anyone other
Interesting.
than her mom. And so
Mm.
like she was like, I remember she was like 3 months old or 2 months old even. She was just like this tiny little thing, and I'd hold her, and she would like try to wiggle out of my hands like a fish.
Gosh.
Yeah, I was like, "Come
Wow.
on, don't hurt yourself." And so like as she's gotten older, I would talk to my partner about this, and we're like, "Well, geez, if you really want a stronger relationship with her, closer relationship with her, like you really need to let's just practice having you spend more time with her."
Mm.
And I don't think I really started doing that until she was already like 2 or 3 o'clock, because I actually wanted to be a stay at home dad. That was my plan and my goal, and it was really, really hard. I know that's, I think you more of your experience, and so I'm sure you can speak onto this a lot more. But I think I tried it for like, I don't know how long, 6 months or something, and I was
Right.
like, I need to do more. Like
Mm.
I was really enjoying having the time, but like I need to have more. And so it was tough, because like I wanted this close relationship with my daughter, and yet I also like wanted to challenge myself intellectually.
Mm.
I wanted to support and contribute to my family financially as well. And so really I think the what it really came down to, the thing that really changed was like, okay, one day a week, I'm just really going to spend most of the day with my daughter. We're going to do as much as possible together. We're going to
Mm.
like plan activities. We're going to do things, and that has actually made a big difference. I've been doing that for a
Yeah.
while now, and I think doing bedtime more, doing certain things, just so she can see I can be that person. I can
Yeah.
fulfill that parent role the way that her mom does, maybe not the exact same way, but in a way that she can trust me and care for me in a way that creates our own bond.
Yeah. For sure. That's a really interesting experience because I'm sure lots of people listening would have identified like as, oh, he's saying that he didn't bond with his newborn. Like, of course, all newborns want to latch straight to the mother because they just spent 9 months in their womb and the breastfeeding, et cetera, et cetera. But it was interesting you said that even at 2 months, she's trying to like get away. And I think, if a baby at 2 months, if they're fed and changed and burped and all these sort of things, they should be relatively comfortable with kind of anything really. So yeah, that is kind of like quite surprising that at that time it was doing. Your daughter was doing that. So at what point were you did those 6 months of stay at home dad? How old was your daughter when you started doing when you did your 6 months?
When I started to do the 6 months, you mean like when I started to spend more time? Oh, I mean like when I was at home with her.
Yeah.
I mean, so she was born in San Diego. We were living in San Diego, and then she was born in July of 2020.
Mm.
So like middle of like lockdown.
Mm.
And so we actually loaded up the largest rental car we could find, and we drove to South Texas, where we live now, to be with my in-laws.
Right.
And so we stayed with my mother-in-law for a long time. Decided we're like, this is where we're going to stay. And after
Mm.
that, when my daughter was about a year old, that's when it was like, okay, now let's be our family together. And
Mm.
that's when I was like, okay, I want to stay home while you're working. So it's about when she was a year old up until a year and a half or so.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And I think that's such a great age to do it. And I think you can still look back on that time of like that's six months of good time that you got to spend kind of helping forge some of the development milestones for your child and kind of like set some of those values in place. Because I think once they're a year, like they are learning things, they are picking things up, and definitely agree with the wanting a little bit more out of the stay-at-home life. I remember when I first became a stay-at-home dad, like trying the whole like a stay-at-home dad and a house husband, let's say, and
Mm.
like really trying to like, go to town on the house, so to speak, and like baking muffins and stuff with my son and like going the extra mile for like every aspect of the family. And that just was not it. Like that was like making me borderline depressed. Like
Yeah.
it was not fun and it was isolating. It was just not good. So that's partly why I started this podcast. It was like a few conversations led me to think about doing something like this, and that's kind of the origin story of the podcast initially. Just like, I need to have something for myself. I still identify as dad as such a huge part of me, and like I'm happy to kind of like go down that road as the thing, as like the hobby, but my identity can't just be family and like serving the family only. So that's where it kind of came from, and I think that's a super common thing, and it's so important that you know those 6 months that you did, and you then changed to something else. That's a fantastic way to kind of change the past when new information comes along. And I think that's such a good way to kind of address things in a family. You don't get stuck in one way. It's so important to know what we want.
I'm curious, like, I mean, you're kind of going through a version of this experience yourself. Like, do you feel like you are getting enough or doing enough things that you are like your identity is feels full, like you're getting enough out of your life? Like, do you feel like you're in that place?
I would say so because I do quite a few things at my church as well. So I like I'm just with a couple of other guys. I head up like a men's ministry thing. So we're putting our heads together to come up with a huge plan for next year of like a roadmap and all this sort of stuff. And then I do a lot of like welcoming and like stage talking. Um, so there's that aspect of my life as well. But obviously, my wife is a maths teacher, so she's a numbers person. She's always been the numbers person. So she has always been the person that's kind of a little bit more responsible with our money because she just likes working with numbers more than I do. And so yeah, at this time we know that I'm not bringing in money to provide for the family financially. So that is obviously something that I think about like long term. Once both the boys are in some form of like preschool, there'll be some hours that I can probably try to put in something else, and that will kind of come back as well. But just knowing that this time, kind of before they're in school, because yeah, I'm not doing this forever. Like once they're in school, like I'm getting a job, I'm getting back into teaching, which was what I used to do, or something else. Like I'm not doing this forever and like picking them up at school and taking them home and always being stay at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
If
and
people
that's
choose to do
awesome.
that,
Yeah, yeah.
I think if people choose to do that as well, that's also a great choice for them. Like they can have an amazing household and like baked cookies every day or super clean house, whatever it might be, and taking all the chores off the other partner, like whatever it might be, fantastic. But for us, like that's kind of our roadmap, so to speak. Um, and yeah, I think identifying that part of us as parents is so important to know this is who I am, this is what I need. And if I'm fulfilled, then I'm the best parent. And if those things have to happen before we can provide for our kids, is what my experience at least, and from talking to other dads as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I completely 100% agree. It's like you have this idea of what you want to do, you try it, and then you
Yeah.
just like see, does this fit with what I want? And like like that's awesome that you also have this plan. Like, okay, for this time amount of time, this is what I'm going to do, and then after that, like I'd like to work. I want to do these other
Mm.
things. You kind of have this idea, and like for me, I actually was like, oh, I'm going to be a stay at home dad for like 10 years, or I don't know. Like I didn't have that plan.
Yeah.
And then so after going through like 2 or 3 months, and I'm like, wait, why does this feel so hard? How could I possibly do this for years if just doing it for a month feels so hard? And so, yeah, I think so much of life and like definitely being a dad and everything is just understanding yourself, being able to acknowledge to yourself, hey, this is much harder than I expected. This is not giving me exactly what I expected. What can I do differently, not just for myself, but also for my daughter, my kids, for my
Mm,
partner, for my, everyone around me, so that they get the version of myself that's like feeling fulfilled and
mm.
excited about life, and not just like depressed and angry and feeling like burdened because like you feel like you have to do so many things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's a really important life lesson that I've learned from being a dad is that I used to be one of these people who I would have to like verbalize my thoughts to my wife. Like I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about this and this has come up and this has come up, and like this would be like weeks long process to kind of come to the I want to do this. Here's the decision sort of thing. So every decision would be days and days and days, if not weeks, if it's like a big decision. But then once you have kids, like that's not really possible anymore, and you kind of need to, right, I'm going to process this now, and I'm going to kind of come to my wife and say, this is the thing, like, and this is what's going to happen. Is that okay? Or do I need to make a compromise based on what you're going to say? And knowing what you want to make sure that that thing's put into place, because then otherwise you're just kind of spinning your wheels and not making any movement whatsoever.
Yeah, I completely resonate with what you just said. I think one of the things that has shocked me, I think it's shocked is the right word, about being a dad, being a parent, is how little time you have for yourself. Like you don't have the luxury of like trying to make decisions slowly sometimes, because
Mm,
like your kids need attention, they need decisions have to be made, and so the available space you have just shrinks so
mm.
much and doing that. So completely understand what you're saying.
And I think the one benefit to that part of being a dad is that it's very difficult to be bored. I find, at least, because we recently went to Disneyland in Paris and we took the train from where we are in the Netherlands. So that was like two or three, like 2 hour trains basically. And I was just sat on the train and both my kids were like quite quiet. They were just happily kind of like playing with their books or like doing whatever. And I was like, just be able to look out the window. I wasn't listening to anything. There was no podcast or music. I wasn't reading. I was just looking out the window for like 15 minutes and there was no feeling of boredom whatsoever. That was just like 15 minutes of like peace and quiet on a train. I can just sit here and feel at peace. I think if before I had kids, 15 minutes, a 15-minute part of a journey with no, like your phone's died and you can't listen to music or you've forgotten your book or whatever, like that sounds like a nightmare to some people to not have some engagement for that amount of time. So I think that's a positive. At least you find that peace in the
Yeah.
stillness rather than the boredom.
Yeah, if you, when most of your day and life is like highly stimulated,
Yeah,
to have a break from that is like a luxury.
yeah. And while we're talking about travel, actually, because I saw that you recently went to Bali with your partner and your daughter. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's it like traveling? I'm trying to think of what the was it a couple of flights you had to take to get there?
It was 3 flights.
Three.
Yeah, for us.
Wow.
We flew from South Texas, so we had to fly through, Dallas to Qatar, to Bali. It ended up being like 26 or 27 flight hours.
Wow.
Yeah, and, we ended up actually booking a hotel in Qatar within the airport just so we could get, like, most of like some of a night's sleep,
Mm,
because my brother actually, we grew up in Hawaii, and so he got married in Hawaii,
wow.
and so he honeymooned in Bali. So they went the shorter route, but apparently the flight was so long that my sister-in-law, from what I understand, got very overwhelmed with the flight. It was really, really hard. And so I was like, okay, if it's hard for an adult and we're taking a 4-year-old, like it's just going to be pretty brutal.
Mm,
And it was, but I think the thing that this is actually our second international flight as a
mm,
family. We actually went to London last year when our daughter was 3, and I think what we did then, which we did again this time, which is like we adjusted our expectations massively, massively. Like, my daughter actually loves flying because we
Interesting.
relax our like video
Oh yeah, yeah.
video allowance. Like we've had people say, "Oh my God, your daughter's like so nice. She's so calm," and we're like, "Well, that's not by accident. Like
Yeah.
we intentionally allow her to watch more videos because like it's just not a normal day. It's or
Mm,
days of travel, and so for her sake, for our sake, like we want to give ourselves more grace,
mm,
and give ourselves more opportunity to just kind of get through that period. And so that's true on the flights, absolutely, but also when we're there too. The food's going to be different from what we're used to. So what she's going to be comfortable eating is going to be very different. We can
mm,
I mean, the way we try to approach food for her, which is always kind of a challenge, but is that like we do our best to give her the meal. That's our job, and then it's her job to choose what she wants to eat. We're going to encourage her to try different things, but like it's her choice. We're not going to just force her. We don't want her to like grow up having these hangups of like, oh, you have to
mm,
eat, finish your plate. Like that's something that I heard when I was growing up. Like your meal's done when you finish your plate,
mm,
and so like I feel I've had to like unlearn that to like get in
mm,
touch with my own sense of appetite and self. And so I want my daughter to be able to have that awareness, and so that extends to giving her that freedom to choose, which it's a long game. So in the short term it can be quite challenging because that
mm,
means that she wants to eat pizza and ice cream and fries most meals, where and then like and fruits. Fortunately, she does love fruits, but like all the other things we were hoping she eats more of, like that she may or may not eat it.
mm. Yeah. So how would you say from the relation point of view of how do you manage expectations with your partner in terms of parenting when you're going on a trip like this?
Yeah, and it's funny because so much of the things we do for our daughter, I think, also apply on what we do for each other, my
Mm,
partner and I, and anyone who's I think going through like a challenging time, whether it's a trip or anything, because like it's really about relationships. It's a relationship versus your child, and then also relationship with your partner. And so the same thing, like we have this thing where we try to have like a brunch date once a week, and that's like our time to really connect, to really understand each other again, celebrate the things that are like coming up or that have
yeah.
happened, and just really kind of solidify into that connection. And for better part of a month we did not have that because we were traveling.
Mm,
And so we said going into it, like, hey, we're not going to be able to like really connect. We're not going to have privacy. We spend a lot of time with family, just doing things. So it's going to be bit challenging. So we're going to try to give each other times to have that downtime,
mm,
alone. But like, well, let's just adjust our expectations for that, what's possible. And I think that really, really helped because instead of having a day, half a day to go work or do something, like we weren't working on this trip. It was
mm,
not possible. And so really realistically, it was like, okay, you get 15 minutes, you get an hour,
yeah.
maybe even 2 hours. Like that's kind of the extent of what we were expecting.
Mm,
And knowing that going into it, I think really makes it easier to not be fed up with each other,
yeah.
to
Yeah.
not be mad at each other because, uh, yeah, it's just so far removed from like your normal routines and all the things like we're here in South Texas. We have a babysitter we rely on. We
Mm,
have both of our parents, and we have a community. We did not have any of that,
yeah.
in Bali, and so it's really about understanding what's realistic and then just still doing your best within those kind of parameters.
Yeah, and I think that's so important as well to provide the best parenting for your children when you're on these trips, because you don't want two parents who are just like kind of constantly trying to find the time to have that bit of downtime, look at their phone, catch up with things, maybe reply to messages that they want to, or watch a video, whatever it might be, like whilst trying to parent as well at that same time and take that time away from the child. But having that separation of just like, okay, this is the time that I'm on, and then this is the time that you're on. And I feel like my wife and I have done quite a few trips, various trips. We've done it so many times now that it's just kind of we just kind of like will slip into it. Like they'll be okay, like she's got both of them, they're reading or whatever. Like they've clearly got a bit of a plan for the next 10 minutes. I know I don't need to be here, and like to make sure that like I'm just gonna go chill or whatever. And we've done it enough now to know that like that's what we need, and I'll get her back later. And it's just we can then provide so much more for our kids because we're having those few little moments to recharge your batteries. And if you don't do that, you're gonna lose the fight, let's say, for sure, on these big trips.
And I mean, like, I think the key thing that she said there, you didn't say this word, but like, if your wife knows, like, okay, you've got the kids for the next 10-15 minutes reading here, she trusts you that you are going to be there to watch the kids later, so she also gets a break. And I think that's such a key part. As long as you trust that you'll do what's needed, what to support each other, then all that becomes possible. Because if you don't trust your partner to help you out, it's just going to be constantly fighting each other. Like, hey, I need you to do this. Why didn't you do that? And then it's like, my God, it's so much harder.
Yeah, like for sure. And you don't want to be coming at your partner whilst on holiday with the kids. That's not gonna be a good memory for them at all.
Not pleasant.
No.
Yeah.
So I want to know a little bit more about what you do as a relationship coach. So you've been doing that for 2 years, and your daughter's obviously 4 years old. So what did it look like, kind of wanting to set that up? What's the heart behind what you tell us a little bit about what it looks like, what you do, and kind of the heart
Yeah.
behind it?
Yeah, I would say actually this is something, it was long time coming, because I was someone who, I feel very fortunate that I grew up in a family where my parents, still together, very much in love. Um, like, I didn't fully appreciate until I got older, like how unusual that can be, and to be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah.
and so I just knew that I wanted to have my version of that. And and so for a long time though, I thought like, okay, you just find the right person, you start dating, uh you fall in love, and then you have a family, and then happily ever after. And I I just realized that that's just not how it works. Like,
Mm.
even after, my wife and I got married, and we were very happy, we're very much in love. We moved to San Diego. We had like these great jobs. Like, we were so excited about life. We knew we were ready to start a family, and like we were still having a really hard time. And one of the stories I tell sometimes is like we got like just blew up at each other because of shower curtains. Like, these were like guest shower curtains. So they were like downstairs. We
Mm.
didn't even see them, but we had this massive, massive argument. We don't really yell at each other, so we're just kind of like, it was like getting really quiet, but like intense with each other. And it was like, I mean, as it becomes so clear in hindsight, is that it wasn't really about the shower curtains. It's
Mm.
never about the shower
Of
curtains.
course.
Like, but it was like, how do we make decisions as a couple? Like, how do
Mm.
we disagree with each other? How can we listen to each other? Like, we were both afraid that we had this new house, we're trying to furnish it, and we're like, oh my God, is what I want not going to matter,
Mm.
to my partner? Do they just get what they want, and then I just have to
Mm.
like suck it up? And if you get a lot of advice, if you look for advice like on the internet, which I don't really recommend, uh, if you do that, like the things that you hear is like, one, that's just the way it is,
Mm.
or two, like, cut your losses and get a divorce. Like, that's it. That's most of the advice you get. And so we were fortunate in that we had been kind of doing work already about how to communicate, how to understand each other, but we had been doing it kind of like as a hobby. And I think that
Right.
moment, once we started fighting about those short curtains, it was like, okay, we can't just love each other enough. You can't just love each other more,
Yeah.
and then everything works out. It's like we really had to figure this out. And so that became, I think, the moment where I really started to take it seriously. And I really started to realize, okay, I can't just be completely concerned about like what I want. I really
Yeah.
have to start understanding her, what she wants, and then how do we work together? And as I started to do that, like, I would talk to my brother, I would talk to my friends, I would talk to my family, and I would realize, my God, everyone has this
Mm.
challenge. And so I just was wanting to share this with more and more people. And then when I would help them out, they'd be like, this is really opening my eyes. This is really changing the way I think about a relationship. And so it'd be like, okay, let me start a business. Let me try to do this to support my family in a way that really fulfills me, means a lot to me, and makes a change in the world that I want to see.
Mm.
And part of it also, like, is I read a book, I think when my wife first got pregnant, and she gave this book to me. It's called Conscious Parenting by Dr. Shafali. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I have not read the book. I have not read the book, but I read the first couple of chapters. And the first couple of chapters, she says something like, if you want to teach your child something, you can't just tell them this is
Mm.
what you do. You have to show them.
Yeah.
Like, you have to model to them the everything, anything you want them to learn, anything, like
Yeah.
to be kind, to be understanding, to be brave. It's like those are things that you need to embody so that they see it, they experience it, and then they can do it themselves. And so I remember I read that, I closed the book, and I swore. Because I thought like parenting would be easier. I thought it would be like you
Mm.
could be like the chill, fun dad, and you're like, "Hey, sport, come over here, do this. Now go run off and have fun, having learned the
Mm.
lesson." And then that's when I was like, "Okay, I if I want my daughter to," because I think looking back at my life, like I feel like I was scared a lot. I think this is also very
Mm.
quite common, but like I think I was scared. I was scared of trying to do something I wanted to do and failing. I was scared of people not liking me. I was
Mm.
scared of, I mean, so much. And I just didn't want my daughter to not feel capable of living the life that she wanted because of those same fears.
Mm.
And so I decided, I mean, it didn't cure me of that. I'm still getting scared, constantly. That's just a natural thing.
Mm.
But I do my best now to take the things that I'm scared of, try to understand them. Why am I scared? And often it's because something matters to me.
Mm.
And this is one of those things. Like, it matters to me how how people treat their kids, how people treat their partners, how much they get out of their lives. Because, we see, we read books, we see movies, we have this view of what it's supposed to look like, and we think, oh man, that's what my relationship has to look like. And if it doesn't look like that, I'm failing.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I've learned, like there are no rules. It's like, if does it serve you, does it serve your partner, then it works. That's
Yeah.
that's that's what matters. But so many people, I don't think, see that. And so that's my mission, is to help people, because it's my mission. It's my mission that I want
Mm.
for my life, and it's the mission that I want to be able to share with other people through my work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that kind of story behind it. I think the thing that's kind of resonating with me, that I was definitely true of me dating and being engaged and getting married, and even just before having a kid. And I think lots of men, I don't know if women feel this. I don't talk deeply with many women. I don't open up that boundary. I obviously talk to lots of men. And I think that a lot of men have this at different stages, where you just think the next stage is the goal. Like, the next stage is the easy part. So, I'm like courting or dating my girlfriend right now. Once we're engaged, everything's going to be easy. That's going to be the easy part. And then it's like, oh, once the wedding's happened, everything's going to be easy. And then it's like, oh, well, once the family's here, everything's going to be easy. And I think even parents, well, once they're in school, everything will be easy. And it's just not true. Like, every stage, every part of your life is going to have some form of challenge, and there is no book for your relationship with your partner and your daughter. There's no book for my relationship with my wife and my kids. So we have to grow the skills and the understanding of how to communicate and build trust. So yeah, I think that's a really important aspect. Why don't you just tell the listeners where they can find out more about it if they're interested? I obviously can put some links in the
Yeah.
description, but
Yeah, I would say like the two best ways, like through social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is at Growing More Joy, and then the other way is through my newsletter. I try to publish at least two times a week, just like kind of more in-depth advice, perspective, guidance. And I also offer like a free guide on like how to really start understanding your partner, how to like have that heartfelt conversation where you're really
mm,
in tune and able to start like opening up that path to like partnership and teamwork.
mm,
I offer that through my newsletter, and you can sign up at growmorejoy.com/newsletter. Grow More Joy is it's my business title, yeah, or
That's
business
awesome.
company
Yeah,
name. Yeah,
that's really cool. We'll of course put the details in the description.
thank you.
Let's circle back to the dad. There was something I wanted to chat to you about, which was an aspect of being a dad that you're proud of. You mentioned to me in the email that that you had heard that the way we speak to children becomes their inner voice, and there was some stories that you've had about your daughter relating to that, and that maybe is a good reflection tool on how you've been parenting. Want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that I have heard a lot. I mean, one of the people I think I learned from a lot is she's really big on Instagram is Dr. Becky Kennedy. I don't know if
Okay.
you're familiar. She has
I'm
like the
not, no.
good, yeah, she has the good inside. She has like an app. She has a book which I'm actually reading, and so I think I like agree with like 95% of what she says, because a lot of it mirrors like what I feel like what I try to do in my own life, in my own relationship with my partner. It's like, how do you apply that to your child? And I
Mm.
think she offers really good practical ways. And it's basically, I would boil it down to is like, treat your child like a person, like a
Yeah.
human, because
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
And it sounds silly to say that, but like I think it's kind of a somewhat radical change from the way that previous generations think about kids. Like kids are like, supposed to be quiet. They're supposed to like do what they're told and not make a mess. And like that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like they're not really people until they're like teenagers or 18, and then like suddenly you're a man, you're a woman, and now we can have that conversation. But really what I try to do is kind of going back to the whole like, I want to be able to embody the things that I want her to be capable of doing as an adult and as a child, like now. And
Yeah.
obviously there's a difference in like, as a kid, as a 4-year-old, like her brain isn't fully developed. It's far from fully developed. And so her capacity to do things is much smaller in many cases. And yet like I can still work with her, talk to her at her level,
Mm.
and still encourage her to have a little bit more patience, have a little bit more understanding, have a little bit more confidence in herself.
Mm.
And I know one of the things I think we were kind of exchanging through email is like, yeah, I the things I tell her now, like my understanding is that will be her inner voice. That's the way, that'll be the way she talks to herself as she
Mm.
grows up. And so my daughter's super small. She's like if when you see those growth charts and you go to the doctor every year, like she's like below the chart.
Oh wow.
And so I was always worried that she would like think that she was like weak and like
Right.
incapable of doing things. And so I've always tried to tell her, I'm like, hey, you can do anything you put your mind to. It's like, you can always find a way to do something if you put your mind to it. And and so like the other day she was like, I don't know, trying to like open something up, and it was really hard. And I was like, I tried to encourage her, like, hey, just give it a few tries. If you can't do it in a few tries, I'm happy to help. Like you can ask for
Mm.
help, but just give it a shot. And so she did it, and then she was like, oh my gosh, like I opened it up, and I was like, hey, that was really hard to do. And she's like, yeah, but I'm strong.
Mm.
No, I'm strong.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. Like
That's awesome.
she's already telling herself that, and so yeah, that's kind of just, I think the way I'm trying to approach parenting is all those things I want her to believe about herself. Those are the things I'm going to teach her or say to her, and also hopefully give her that opportunity so that she can prove that to herself as well.
Mm. That's awesome. I was reminded of the book How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. It's a very common parenting book. There's quite an old one that's like
Mm.
how to talk so kids will listen, and then
Okay.
there's like a newer version which is like for kids between the ages of 2 to 7. And basically, the start of each chapter, the author tells it all comes out of like she's hosted in the past like sessions with parents where she'll bring her research and her advice and get the feedback of parents. So then in the book she shares the stories of parents and some of what happens in these forums. And basically at the start of each chapter, she'll kind of say, imagine you were at work and your boss came over to you and you were like, hey boss, I want to show you something really quick. I've done like the task you sent me to do. I've done it. And even more so. And if your boss just kind of looks at you and good job, and just like walked off, like, how would you feel about that? And it was like all these things of like, how would you feel if your friend or your partner or your family member or not, like trying to capture what we say to kids and get you to think about how you would feel and how you would react if another adult did it to you. And it's like, it's really confronting sometimes, because it's like, how does this person on like the other side of the world like know exactly how I talk to my child sometimes? And it's just so common. But they're not trying to like shame you into this. Like, yeah, this is the kind of habit that people fall into, but this is what we are advising, and this is what we think is the best way to do it. So just on the back of what you were saying specifically there, one of the things I've been trying to do is, rather than saying good job, just comment on what they've done. It's like, you opened that lock. That was really hard for you to do when you were trying to do it 3 weeks ago, or you took your jumper off all by yourself. You couldn't do that last week. And it sounds so silly to just say what's happened. But like for both my kids, they'll now just be like, I did it. Like they will say that because I'll just say to them, you did it. Like what you were trying to do, you did it. And they'll just say, I did it. And that little celebration they have when they're trying to do something and then they can do it. You're completely right. Like what we say over and over and over again, if we kind of feel a bit silly saying it, it does kind of seep into them and it does kind of come back out of it. And it's so amazing to see that. Another big one that my wife and I have always said is, if they ever say I can't do something, we kind of correct them and say, oh, you can't do that yet. It's like, oh, I can't do my shoes up. It's like, you can't do your shoes up yet. I'll help you this time, but maybe next time you can. So yeah, we always do that. I can't yet.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not allowed to say I can't. So yeah, it's totally true. Like our words are so powerful, and I think that's such a good thing to remind ourselves as parents. Like, and it's so nice to kind of see that feedback occasionally when they kind of come out with that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like to me, how invisible that stuff can be. Also, in like the way that, like, especially when my daughter was younger and we weren't really being as intentional about what we say and what we do and how we parent. Like we would just kind of do, I would find myself saying and doing the things that like my parents did
Yeah.
and other things. And then like I would like really think about it, and I, of course, I'd also see it on Instagram. My Instagram feed is filled with like parenting videos all the time. And I remember one time, I think a video like called into question. It's like, are you telling your kid that like something is bad or evil, because like it hurt them or inconvenienced them in some way? And like shocked me, because I think I did that. I've seen my parents do it. I've seen my grandparents do it. I've seen like relatives do it. People my age do that too. Like it is just a instinctual, habitual thing that just gets passed down, where it's like, oh my God, you stubbed your toe on the chair. That's a bad chair, evil
Yeah.
chair. And it is like, it seems silly, but like, man, like, do we have to demonize something just because it inconvenienced us? Like, is that our natural knee-jerk reaction? Like, is that the reaction that I want my daughter? Like someone says something that makes her, feel a certain way, and she's just be like, you're bad, you're evil.
Yeah.
Like, is that the reaction I want her to just fall into? And I'm like, no. So it's like and it's really can come from something as simple as like how you treat like, yeah, tripping on a chair or something. So like those little words, like you're saying, like they can feel like they're inconsequential, but when you say them through their lives, I mean, the proof is that like I'm saying it again, like we say it, the same things that our parents said, that our grandparents said. And so when we change it, like that's when we change for our kids as well, how their outlook on their lives.
For sure. No, that's such an important thing to think about. And I remember also seeing like a different parent video that was the grandmother comes to stay and the mother is just chasing the grandmother. Like the grandmother will say something and then the mother will say, oh no, you can't say that. It's like, oh no, you can't say that. It's like, oh no, you can't say that. Like bringing up all the book things or like what you shouldn't be saying to kids. And then the grandmother's just like, well, what can I say? And I think it can be difficult sometimes to kind of like, if you are confronted with lots of stuff that does come up, It's like, are you saying that everything I say is bad? It's like, well, no, but if you can just try one different thing and see what happens, then that's a really good one. I think for
Yeah.
me, it was like, I'm proud of you. When I read in a book, it's like, oh, you shouldn't say I'm proud of you to your kid when they achieve something. I was like, what? Like, I am. Like, but you're taking the glory away from them. It's like, God, the amount of people that would have said I'm proud of you, like, to me, like, I've always wanted to hear people say that. So it was like that was one of the things for me. I was like, oh, that's kind of strange, but you know, I guess so. I've tried to do that. I've tried to
Yeah.
think about not saying that, and the whole "you did it" thing seems to work with them. They seem to celebrate themselves. So,
I kind of go into this like with the understanding, like I've had the exact same conversation with my parents, my grandparents, where like, okay, maybe this was the best understanding
mm,
30, 40 years ago, but like now this is the
mm,
best understanding. And I tell them, and they're like, well, and like I'll tell them, like when my daughter, if and when she ever decides to have kids, like I'm positive that she is going to be like, Dad, all those things you did, so wrong, so wrong. And like that, but that's just the way it is. It's like there's going to be a
mm,
new understanding, different understanding. Hopefully it's progress. And I fully concede that like some of what we're doing, like it's not having the effect that we want, but we're just doing the best we can, and that's all we
yeah.
can do.
And I think that's such an important thing. And I think anyone that's taken the time to listen to a dad focused podcast probably is doing the best they can. There will be people out there that are parents that maybe aren't trying to do the best they can. But I think anyone that puts the time and effort in to do a bit of research to kind of have other voices in their head are always trying to do the best they can.
So I actually would love to share something there. I truly believe that everyone is doing the best that they can.
Mm,
Um, I think that if we were to look at someone and then like just completely disagree with them, like they're saying, "I'm proud of you." They're saying all the things that we're like, well, maybe there's a different way of saying it that might have an effect that we really want to promote in our kid. Maybe they're not doing that. And it's like, well, why aren't they doing it? One, they might not know about it,
mm,
right? Or like they're in an environment where they're so tired, they're so exhausted, they're so busy at work that like it just slipped their mind in that moment.
mm,
It's like I think it's like what we're talking about with going on trips. Like our capacity to parent is not fixed. It's
mm,
gonna like fluctuate based on our understanding, awareness, our rest, our how
yeah,
much food we've eaten. And so I really do believe that everyone's doing the best they can, which doesn't mean that they can't learn to do more in the future. But any given moment, like if we could do better, we would.
yeah,
Not to like harp on what you're saying, like, oh my god, you said it so wrong. I think it's just I really believe strongly in like and dads as people, trying to give ourselves offering compassion to ourselves.
yeah.
Because like, man, being a parent is so hard. Being a dad is so
Mm,
hard. Being a human is just so hard.
that's true.
And sometimes it feels easier and sometimes it feels harder. But like, I think, yeah, we're just doing the best we can based on our resources, our understanding, and like the challenges in front of us. And so, uh, I've never really been able to yeah, I think when I'm able to offer myself compassion, that allows me to just feel a little bit better and hopefully do a little bit more in the future.
Mm. Yeah, I think offering yourself compassion is also an offering, like you're saying with the travel thing, offering compassion to the parents that you see on an aeroplane that are trying their best to calm a screaming toddler down, or on a train that are. We had a few incidents on the train when we were traveling through Europe. I won't go into, but yeah, having that compassion in those situations can be more difficult. But when you meet someone in the street or something, you tend to have a decent amount of compassion for someone. You have a pretty average amount of grace and compassion for these people. And yeah, I do agree that like the absolute majority of people, if they're present, they're showing up, they're providing, whether it be providing financially, providing emotionally, providing a roof, whatever it might be, they will be doing the best they can. I would be wary of kind of saying to someone that's maybe been raised in an abusive home to say that their parents did the best they can. Like that's my kind of like that's kind of the elephant in the room that I was kind of like alluding to. Not the person that's like not listening to podcasts, but the person that's like, the kids in front of them, they're trying their best they can. I agree that they are doing their best. So, but yeah, we actually recently released an episode where we tried to talk about helping dads and men that maybe aren't looking for help. And that's also like a big thing that I'm trying to think about. And I think it often comes from vulnerability and kind of saying to someone, it's like, hey, like, I'm struggling with this. Like, how about you? So I think it's a really powerful aspect of relationship as well, which I'm sure you must have seen in your kind of line of work.
Yeah. I think I do see it with men and fathers in particular. It's like, and I experienced this myself, where it's like, you're the strong dad who like gets things done, provides for your family, doesn't complain. Like that's kind of like the ideal, I think, in that in culture, popular culture, and I think that it kind of, that expectation robs us of so much of having that compassion. Like it's not compassion. That's not a compassionate view, because it means that like there is a right way and a wrong way to be a dad, to be a father. And if you aren't providing financially, if you aren't solving problems and fixing things around the house, and if you aren't able to protect your family physically, and or like all these like kind of stereotypical things, if you aren't doing it, does that mean like you're not being a good father and a husband? And like I just don't think that's true. But it really does mean like understanding yourself to the degree, like, is that what you want for your life? Or like what is it, what is your life and your family, like what do you really want that to look like? What do you want that to feel like? I think it really has to come from having that deep understanding and vulnerability, like being able to admit that to yourself, that because only I think when you can imagine and understand what you want your life to look like, what you want your relationship to look like with your partner, with your kids, with yourself, then it gives you like a path to like create it. So it really comes from that. And if your like vision of like what your life is supposed to look like comes from like movies, comes from like what other people tell you, wherever it is, it's most likely it's not going to feel fulfilling. It's not going to feel, the way you want it to feel.
No, I totally agree with that, and I think that's such a good way to kind of to leave the listeners with, like, once you kind of identify that thing, the goal, like that's how you can then like drive towards, and that's how you can get towards there. And the path is going to be a long one, and it might be arduous, it might be difficult and up and down at times, but if you don't have that goal, it can be difficult to know kind of how to get on that path.
Yeah, it's the path we follow for our entire lives. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So as we start to kind of come to the end of the episode, I tend to ask all the dads to try to think back to the time before they became a father. So I'm guessing about a little over 4 years ago, before your daughter was born. What advice do you think Matt needed to hear back then, if any?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. I would probably say, this fatherhood is going to be an experience that will challenge you probably more than anything in your life. And that's okay. That's normal. And the most important thing is to really understand what you want out of your life and to just do your best to make that happen every day. Whatever that means and can look like. Because you can never do more than that. And you really can't do any less than that. And as long as you're able to do that, then you are working toward that life that you want.
Definitely. No, for sure. And I think breaking it down to day by day is a great way to think about it. Like, we can only really control what's happening in the day that we're currently in. So that's awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with us. I feel that the time's flown by. But yeah, really appreciate you taking time to come on the Dad Dialogue podcast with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. A huge thank you goes to Matt for coming on the show and sharing his stories with us. Clearly, Matt has a big heart for people to make improvements within their lives and their relationships. And it was awesome to see how he tries to do that. He clearly approaches things with such positivity. As you've noticed during the episode, when Matt mentioned about all parents doing their best, that's the part that kind of challenged me a little bit. And you can see in the episode, I'm kind of taken aback a little bit because I'm kind of trying to process it, and we've chatted afterwards as well, kind of like to follow up. And the way that I've kind of come to think about it is that if people are choosing to parent, if people are choosing to be around their kids, then they are doing their best. For me to try and reconcile the idea of someone who's not present, or a deadbeat father or a deadbeat mother, someone that kind of like leaves their kids, that's the thing to me that I struggle to think about if they're doing the best. But I really do think that this question of are parents doing the best that they can do is a really interesting one, and it's really helped me kind of process the way that I view parenting, and as well as kind of tackling some of the history within my own life from my own parenting, and the experience I had with my parents. So it was a really interesting thing. I think it's one of these questions, one of these areas that there's no real right or wrong answer. It's kind of how we process things, how we view things, and the lens we view the world through. And the reason for this podcast is to help shape that lens for me to be the most positive as possible. So I really did appreciate Matt kind of bringing that up and kind of challenging me a little bit on that. So I think it's one of those things that we daily process. We have to kind of go through it and think about it and ponder it and come to our own conclusions. So I hope you're able to do that as well. I'd be curious to hear down in the comments below if you're on YouTube, or you can drop me an email. Just share your opinions if you think this is something that is true as well. Do you think all parents are doing their best? All parents ever? Parents that are present, parents that are not, parents within unfortunately abusive households? Like what does that look like? How can we define that? I think this is a super important thing to think about. So Matt did mention some of his social profiles in the episode. You can find him on Instagram or YouTube, Growing More Joy. I'll put all the links to that in the description, of course. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.